She didn't scream at me, and she didn't cry. And she didn't throw anything across the kitchen. She just looked at me, and in this calm, quiet voice, like she was reading a grocery list, she said, "I think we should separate." Ray, it was a Thursday night, and I was watching SportsCenter, and the Tigers had just blown a 3-run lead in the 7th. And I remember actually thinking, that was the worst thing that was going to happen to me that night. I was 53 years old, and I had been married to this woman for 24 years. And I had absolutely no idea that she had already left. Not that night, not that month. She had been leaving for years, quietly, steadily. One unanswered silence at a time, and I had been sitting there watching baseball, thinking everything was fine. "I love you, Diane." That's what I never said. Not the way she needed to hear it. But here's the part that broke me when I finally understood it. She had been trying to tell me for years. And I had been listening. I just wasn't hearing a single word. My name is Ray Callahan. And I am a project manager for a commercial construction firm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I am very good at my job. I manage budgets. I manage schedules. I manage 40-plus people on a job site. And if you give me a problem with a load-bearing wall or a subcontractor who hasn't shown up in 3 days, I will have a solution for you by end of business. Turns out none of those skills transferred to marriage. 0. I checked. It's like having a commercial driver's license and discovering it doesn't help you parallel park. Diane and met in 1999 at a friend's 4th of July cookout in Kalamazoo. She was laughing at something her friend said, and I thought, that's the best sound I've ever heard. We were married 2 years later. We have 2 kids. Our son Marcus is 22. Our daughter Kelsey is 19 and away at Michigan State. For most of our marriage, I would have told you we were solid. We weren't fighting. The bills were paid. The kids were good. I coached Marcus's Little League team for 4 years. We went to Diane's parents for Christmas, my parents for Thanksgiving. That was the routine, and the routine worked. And I thought, this is what a stable marriage looks like. I had basically project managed my marriage. Deliverables, house, income, kids, vacations every 2 years. Status, on schedule. Budget, under control. Client satisfaction survey, never actually distributed. Which, in hindsight, was the problem. What I didn't notice, what I completely missed, was that somewhere around year 15, Diane stopped bringing things up. She used to push back on me. She used to get frustrated, get loud, tell me when something wasn't working. And then one year, she just didn't. And I thought, we finally hit our stride. We're mature now. We're past the friction stage. I was so wrong about what that silence meant that it's almost impressive. Here's what the silence actually looked like. Now that I can see it clearly, she stopped telling me things about her day. She has a good job. She's a clinical coordinator at a hospital. She deals with complicated people and complicated situations all day long and for years. She'd come home and tell me about it. And then she stopped. And I thought, she's tired. She's decompressing. She was decompressing. For me, I was the thing she needed to decompress from, and I had diagnosed myself as the solution. She stopped suggesting things. Weekend trips, dinners, stuff with other couples. She used to be the one who made our social life happen, because if it was left to me, we would have watched TV and ordered pizza until we died. And then she stopped suggesting things, and I thought, great, she's become more of a homebody. We're in sync now. She started spending more time with her sister, Karen. More phone calls. More weekends at Karen's place in Lansing. And I thought, they're going through a phase where they're close again. Normal stuff. I was basically doing the construction equivalent of looking at a building that is actively on fire and saying, beautiful. The old wood is finally getting some warmth in it. And then one Saturday morning, I walked into the kitchen and she was on the phone with Karen. And she laughed this real, open, easy laugh. And when she saw me come in, the laugh just stopped. Like someone turned a dial. I made myself a cup of coffee and I went back to the garage. And I told myself it was nothing. But something in me knew. Something in me filed that moment away and didn't look at it again for months. Because here's the thing about not wanting to see something. You get very, very good at not seeing it right up until the moment you can't look away anymore. When Diane said she wanted to separate, my first reaction after the shock was to do what I always do with a problem. Make a plan. I am a man who fixes things. You tell me something is broken. I figure out what it needs. I get it done. That is the entire job description of my life, professionally and personally, so naturally. I decided to fix my marriage the same way I'd fix a busted HVAC system. Identify the fault. Throw resources at it. Close the ticket. I booked a weekend at a place up near Traverse City. Nice resort on the lake, the kind of place with fireplaces in the rooms and spa packages and a wine list I don't understand. $400 a night. I was going to romance my way out of this problem. Diane looked at me like I had handed her a blueprint for a building she'd never asked for. She said, very quietly, Ray, that's not what I need. And I said, then what do you need? And she said, I've been telling you for 10 years. I hear you. That's what I never said. Not once. Not in the way that would have proven it was true. If that just hit you the way it hit me, stay with me. Hit subscribe. I'm not done with this story yet. I stood there in the kitchen holding a printed reservation confirmation. I had actually printed it like it was a proposal. Like a piece of paper was going to demonstrate emotional availability, and had no idea what to say next. The resort wasn't the problem. The resort was me trying to solve an emotional crisis with a line item. I had been doing that our entire marriage. Good vacation, problem handled. Nice dinner, tension resolved. New kitchen renovation, resentment addressed. I had been billing emotional labor as a capital expense for 24 years and wondering why the building kept developing cracks. It took my brother Tom to finally explain to me what I had actually built, and it wasn't pretty. I drove to Detroit 2 weeks later to see my brother Tom. Tom is 58, divorced twice, and the kind of man who has made every possible mistake so that people like me can watch and learn. Except I hadn't been watching. I told him the whole thing. The Thursday night, the resort, the printed reservation, Diane's face when I handed it to her. Tom listened without saying anything, which is unusual for Tom. Tom usually has an opinion before you finish the sentence. The fact that he waited until I was done was either a sign of growth or a sign that the situation was bad enough to require actual thought. Turned out it was the second one. He said, Ray, when a woman stops fighting with you, she's not at peace. She's at the door. I said, what do you mean? He said, fighting means she still thinks it's worth fighting for. When she stops, when she goes quiet, that's not resolution. That's resignation. She already had the argument 1,000 times in her head, and she stopped having it out loud because she decided it wasn't going to change anything. And then he said something I'm going to carry with me for the rest of my life. He said, the silence you thought was peace. That was her grieving the marriage while she was still in it. I sat with that for a long time. I thought about every quiet dinner I had interpreted as comfortable. Every weekend she spent with Karen that I had called her getting some sister time. Every laugh that stopped when I walked into the room. She hadn't been distant. She had been mourning. And I had been so busy managing the project that I hadn't noticed the client had already walked off the job. My dad was a good man. Worked hard, came home, kept the lights on. He wasn't cruel. He just wasn't present. Not emotionally. None of the men I grew up around were. You showed love by showing up and providing. You didn't talk about what you felt. You built things, you fixed things, you paid the bills. That was the job, and I had inherited that job description without ever questioning whether it was complete. I drove back to Grand Rapids that night with one question in my head. Was there still time to ask her something I had never asked before? I got home around 11. Diane was already in bed. She had moved to the guest room a few weeks earlier, and I had respected that, which was maybe the first genuinely respectful thing I had done in a long time. I stood in the hallway outside that door for probably 5 minutes, which, if you know me, it's about 4 minutes and 50 seconds longer than I usually spend standing anywhere doing nothing. I am a man who walks into rooms with a plan. Standing in a hallway with no plan, in the dark, at 11 at night, was essentially my personal nightmare. I had no deliverables, no timeline, no risk mitigation strategy. Just me and a closed door and 24 years of things I hadn't said. I knocked, she said. Yeah. I opened the door. She was sitting up in bed, reading. She looked at me with this expression, "Tha."